Torah, 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 Torah. Yeshua's the way, the truth, and the life.
Okay, we're in the Torah portion, Miketz, and or however you want to pronounce it. And this is a Torah portion that covers Joseph and kind of the end of his years. There's a lot to this. If you follow the Torah portions, you know that Joseph was put in jail and his brothers deceived him, and all kinds of different things going on with Joseph. And when he gets out, I'm just going to do a general overview based on what I'm going to talk about, which has to do with this, but it also has to do with some research I did. So Joseph was put in prison, and they found out that he could interpret dreams and many other things. And the Pharaoh of Egypt at that time called him forth to interpret some of his dreams. Joseph interpreted the first set, and the Pharaoh trusted him from that point. And then the Pharaoh gave him another set of dreams. And the real basic bottom line of what had happened is that Joseph let him know that in Egypt there would be 7 years of famine, or 7 years of plenty, and then 7 years of famine. And as we read the text, we find that it is said not just Egypt has the 7 years of plenty. Well, actually, no, let me go back. Egypt has the 7 years of plenty, but the entire planet had 7 years of famine after the 7 years of plenty. And so I'm one of those people that when I read Torah, anybody that's watched me on Lamb for the 8 years that we've been on here, going on 9 now, especially Sandi, knows that I'm very literal. I'm very black and white. I am a realist. So I look at it as though I try to put myself into that situation, that time and everything. And so as you read into the text, and after he interprets the dreams, there's really not a lot of discourse there that explains anything. And my thought is that if it truly does say, and when you get into reading it in detail, you find out the entire planet had 7 years of famine. I mean, of course, this is proved even more that Joseph's family, who lived outside of the realms of Egypt, came to buy food. And so you're thinking here, the thought, to my understanding, this is the way I'm trying to remember back when first going over this, is that, well, Egypt's a desert. How in the world did it have enough food to actually feed the entire planet? Because it says they came from all over the world to buy food. And how in the world did they have enough food to feed the entire planet? And so I started doing research from that point. Now, at the same time, I was working on a novel called Experiencing the Big X. I had already kind of put together the characters. I put together the format. I put together what I wanted to do. And really the novel was based on a walkthrough from a Hebrew person and an Egyptian person or people living at that time, and what they would have gone through in living out the plagues. That was my first thought. And I thought, well, I'll do a book and I'll take each chapter for each plague and kind of walk through that. Well, it ended up being 30 chapters. It just expanded. The Lord just gave me so much more on what to write and how to write it. But what happened was, as I read this, because it was based around starting from the 7 years of plenty, I was doing the research on this for logistics purposes for the novel, and I had to stop because I couldn't put the logistics part together. It didn't work out. So I started using like Google Maps and going in and finding the area. And I wanted to find Goshen, and I wanted to find, the whole Nile and the Nile Delta and the land, the desert and everything. And that's when I came to the realization, and of course it was layer upon layer upon layer, that it wasn't the desert at all where they grew the food for Egypt, for the whole country of Egypt. And as I did my research, come to find out, even yet still today, and has always been, that the Nile Delta, which is a place and I shut that down. I wish I hadn't shut that down. I just had a picture of it up, and I shut that off. I'm sorry. But the Nile Delta is a triangular piece like this at the top of Egypt. And if you go look at the land of Egypt, you'll see as Egypt comes like this, and almost looks like a teardrop, the very top of it is green. And this part right here is the Nile. And so the Nile River is one of the only rivers in the world, on this whole planet, that actually travels north. So if you look at the Nile River and it's actually going north, and where it ends up is in the Nile Delta. And the Nile Delta is not that big, but it has so many minerals and resources that the Nile River actually brings into the Nile Delta, that it's just massive. It brings the richest nutrients that there are in the planet into this one area. The only thing is that the Nile Delta, and this is my research, is that the Nile Delta used to flood 3 times a year. So when you planted, you could plant whatever you wanted to, food, plants, the whole thing, trees, everything in the Nile Delta. The problem is that 3 times a year it's wiped out. All you have to harvest before the floods come, because it wipes everything out that you've grown. And so what I did is I started in my thought pattern and looking at this and thinking that this is the most nutrient full area on the planet. Then what if they were able to maintain the Nile Delta and make that so that they could grow enough and store enough grain and everything else for what they needed? They had 7 years of plenty. This is not just 7 natural years. Why would Joseph interpret the dream to say 7 years of plenty when it would have just been 7 normal years? So the Lord actually blessed what Joseph had prepared for them. The next question was, where did the children of Israel live? And if you look on Google Maps, you look on any map of Egypt, there is still a city right. You have the Nile Delta that looks like this. And right down in this corner on this edge is a city called Goshen. And it still exists today. It's an Egyptian city, but it still lives today. So when you put it together and you start looking at this area right in here, what I found was, instead of up in the north where archaeologists believe that the children of Israel lived, it's more down in the bottom part of the Nile Delta. So now, today, there is a canal system within the Nile Delta that far surpasses, as far as engineering is concerned, far surpasses any canal system or anything that's done anywhere on the planet, even yet still today, that regulates the water when it comes in from the Nile River. It disperses into, you imagine this area like this, and when it comes in, it disperses the water into lots of different areas, allowing, when it's supposed to flood, that it won't flood. It actually makes the water go into these different areas instead of just tributaries. And if you look at the map, there's 4 tributaries that come off of this into different places. But with the canal system, it actually disperses the water and it never floods. It actually makes the water go to the right places. And also, that is still to this day, a huge area for growing food. So more research. As a matter of fact, it was over almost 2 years. It was like a year and 10 months of research that I did on this, that I started putting together, that you can't really find how long the canal system has been in the Nile Delta. There's no documentation on that. So I start putting together, well, what if Joseph engineered, the Jewish person that he was, with the engineering intelligence that most Jewish people have, engineered this canal system and allowed it to disperse to the point where they could build storage facilities for the grain and everything that they were going to save up. And of course, with him interpreting Pharaoh's dream, he knew, following the 7 years of plenty, there were going to be 7 years of famine. He knew this was coming, so it's good to store that grain back. So in even more research, what I did was I found that, in fact, there were, at that time, now I don't know, I haven't done the research in a long time, but I did find that there were 5 other people out there that all believed, this is after I came up with it, that also believed that Joseph had engineered the canal system. And so through their research, and what I found is that there was an actual city called Quantir, and it was a part of the Goshen area. Now, from what I found is that Goshen covered an area on the edge of that Nile Delta, on this lower edge here, and kind of was in a circle. But at the top of Goshen, there still exists today a couple of aqueducts, there's all kinds of stones and architectural findings of buildings and everything. And what is believed is that they literally, in the city of Quantir, which is right on the top edge of Goshen, is the agricultural center for Egypt. And it is where, and this is my opinion here, is that we know that Korah was a Jew, and because he left with the people when they went on the Exodus. Korah was a Jew. Korah is also, you can find it in a couple of different places. Korah was also an agricultural engineer. So it's believed that possibly Korah was in charge of the agricultural city of Quantir, and they had storage facilities along the tributaries, not the canals, but you have the Nile Delta and you have the tributaries coming off. Like 4 of them, they had different facilities and they would travel back and forth. But this really makes a lot of sense, because when you start thinking about it, how did they have enough grain, all this kind of thing? And of course, I mean, there's stories that say that they think that the Hebrew people are the ones that built the pyramids and all that junk. That's a bunch of junk. That's not true at all. It wasn't even the same time period. And because it was such on the Nile Delta, you have all along the edge of it is a military drop off. In other words, military people they had all kinds of different places along there where they wouldn't allow people to actually go into the desert part of Egypt. It was a high risk area. So the Hebrew people most likely never went into Egypt unless the Egyptian authorities needed them for one reason or another. And this is, of course, you talk about Moses and Aharon going and talking to Pharaoh. There's a good possibility they were allowed, those two were allowed into the Egypt part. But anyway, I mean, that's detail. There's a lot of details that I ran into that I find a lot of it's speculation, a lot of it's theory, a lot of it is opinion, but it's all based on the research and actually archaeological finds within the Nile Delta, not necessarily in Egypt, the lower Egypt. Upper Egypt is the Nile Delta. That's where all of this happened. And when people would come in from all over the world, once again, you have the Nile Delta, and along the edges where my hands are was all military bases, and they would not allow people to come lower than that. So if people came to buy food, they literally had to come into the Nile Delta. It's the only way they could come in, because there was not necessarily a hierarchy of Egypt that would fight in the Nile Delta. It was all lower than that, or into what's now considered Saudi Arabia. Interesting how this would all come together, and it literally proves that how they could store up enough food to feed the entire planet, and people would come in and do this. So there you go. That's basically my part of Miketz. That is putting together logistically what might have happened at that time and how it was put together, and how you can still to this day go and do that research and find out logistically how things were put together at that time. I think it's really interesting. And my book actually portrays all this, because most of what happens in my novel, for the first part of it, happens in Quantir. And the difference, there is an actual aqueduct, or the remains of an aqueduct, at the very north end of Goshen, and it divides off from where Goshen is where the Hebrew people live. Now, here's another thing. So as you get through the plagues, you notice that it's interesting, because the plagues would happen to Egypt, but they didn't happen to the people of Goshen, because the people of Goshen had their own area. It's almost round. It's almost heart-shaped, actually, because it's heavier at the top and smaller at the bottom. But these plagues did not happen in Goshen, but everywhere else the plagues would happen. And I depict that in my book. And also, I have this teaching in a lot more detail. Let me go look at this real quick. I can get over there real quick because I can give you. Okay, come on. There we go. Come on up here. I'm going to give the link to this. Hold up. No, we don't want this. Yeah, see, that's me talking. Here's the link to my teaching. It's on the website. If you go on to MessianicLambNetwork.com, right at the top, you're going to see Experiencing the Big X, and it's right there. So if you want to go check this out, the Big X, in other words, the Big Exodus, Experiencing the Big Exodus. So, Sandi, what you think? You've heard this story before. I think you've even seen the teaching. You're muted. So you're familiar with the detail I put into it and all that.
Yes. And I want you to go over this because I know this is something that everybody's going to ask because you brought it up. So I want you to explain it, how you see it and how you studied it out. I thought that the Hebrew I thought the Hebrew people went through the first three plagues. Explain. I wanted you. I know. I'm saying that's the question.
Most Torah teachers that I've talked to also agree with that. But I mean, I've heard as many say the opposite, that they went through everything. But I don't believe that they did, simply because of the wording of the text. I mean, when you go back and you look at the actual wording of the text, there's really a couple that I can't remember which ones because I haven't gone to look at it, but there's a couple of them specifically, like the plague of darkness. It says, and it didn't go over the area of Goshen or something like that.
I think the first three are the ones that are usually the controversy. Most people don't believe they went through the others, but some do believe that the word says the first three they went through. So I wanted to know if you wanted to.
See, I'm picturing the way I did the research and the way I wrote the book is that you got to remember that Quantir, which is north of Goshen, was where all the slave work was being done. The slave work was not just for the agricultural part of the Nile Delta. It was literally building the city of Quantir, which is an Egyptian city. It's not where the Israelites lived. So anything that happened would have happened around Goshen, and the Israelites would have been there at that time. But as far as the area of Goshen, which was quarantined off because they weren't allowed to go outside, they were prisoners in the land of Goshen, is what it was. And so a lot of that could be understood as outside of Goshen, and there were a lot of Hebrew people outside of Goshen would have experienced whatever plagues were going on. For instance, in my book, I have several people right there at the very beginning who are next to one of the canals, and the frogs come out, and they were Hebrew people. But it didn't happen in the actual area of Goshen. It's my opinion based on the research I did. And also, I think the Hebrew text will verify that. It's my opinion.
Well, I just wanted, when some people are listening to this and they may have heard it for the first time, they may be saying, well, I thought, and I wanted you to give that perspective, and so they don't go, well.
Like I said, though, I have heard as many for both sides of it. I've heard as many Torah teachers, because I've talked to a lot, especially back in the day when I was studying this out, writing the book, and making the DVD and everything. That's also a question people have come up with, and I it's one of those things where I find that people that believe that they didn't go through the plagues, it's no big deal. But the people that think that they did go through the plagues, it's like they really want to emphasize that point, and I don't get it. I understand why.
Let's take it then. This isn't what I planned, but let's take it to the Brit, because we know those plagues are going to be revisited in the end. And when we say, since we're just going along this line, when we say that the Hebrew people did not experience the plagues, when we think of the Great Tribulation, we see those plagues revisited. So will the Hebrew people, those who have been grafted in, and I'm one who believes Jew and every tribe, including Judah, has to be grafted in, because Judah's sin was great as well.
Right.
All those that have been grafted in will not experience the plagues as either, according to that.
So it's a mirror, it's a pattern of what we see before happens again. And so that's a good point. That's a good point.
So anyway, now when we're told to get thee out of Babylon, we probably should go. But I think
not going to get many chances, but
no, I'm waiting for God to do it. Well, he sent you what is the story? He sent you a donkey, a helicopter, and you didn't take it. Oh, by the way, Nitsa.
Yeah, I see, Nitsa. No, you're not going to get me to say it, Nitsa. Not going to happen.
I'll say it for you, Nitsa. Polo. There we go. Yeah.
Anyway.
But, and how does that look? End times is a big topic of conversation, has been for years, but with things up in such upheaval around the world, some say we're experiencing plagues right now, and it's only going to get worse. Whether they're man-made or nature, the word doesn't define that. Plague is plague, or disease is disease. And, so it's something people are thinking about. And that is why I believe we've got to be ready in season and out. And we have got to be so close to him that we recognize his voice. And
well, you bring it into today's understanding of what's going on. I mean, especially with the quarantine that's happening and the way that we're being treated, it's real similar. And what will be happening very soon, I believe, it's very similar to that. And that's one of the reasons people, it's like, and I don't mean this negatively, but you hear a lot of Christians say, well, why do I need to study out the Old Testament? Why do I need to go back and look at the law? Why do I need to know about all the things that they went through? I'm not going through those things. I didn't do that. That was the God of that time, everything. And so it's kind of like, every time I read the Torah, every time I read before Matthew, I get an better understanding of what I'm going through today. Every time, so to say, why do you go through the Torah portions? Why do you read the Old Testament? Why talk about this all the time? All that's done. And it's like, no, it's actually everything that happened then is happening right now, and if you don't, to me, I'll never forget when I first started learning about Torah and going in and studying and being taught and all that thing, and I would be telling my Christian brothers about because they'd be asking, Mark, what are you doing? What's all this Jewish stuff you're doing? And why are you learning the Old Testament and all this kind of stuff? And it's saying, by when I learn this stuff and I go back into the New Testament, all the windows and doors of the New Testament just fly open. They just fly open. because now I have an understanding why they did this and why they did this and why Yeshua was here and why Paul did this and all this kind of stuff. I understand that now. Whereas before I was blind reading the New Testament, but go back and learn this stuff. And like the things I'm talking about here, I mean, why should we know that Joseph engineered the canal system in Egypt? Well, don't you want to know where they got all that food? You know, I mean, it's right there. And there's a lot of things, man. If they put what is it? Is it at the end of Genesis or Deuteronomy that says that if we were to put everything that happened into these books, you wouldn't be able to contain the volumes of books or something like that? I don't know whether they're talking to Moses or is talking about everything that happened. They can't do it. You've got to figure it out for yourself. And this was one of those things that really helped me understand. I can see what they were doing. I can go through that same time that they went through this, you know. And so we'd all love to have a time machine. Well, the Lord's given you a time machine right here. Here's the best time machine that there is.
That's good.
So there you
I
go.
really like that. You know, the best time machine. Study your word, because what has happened in the past happens again and again. And we are living this thing out right now. You know, the journey of the Hebrew people is happening again. So folks, where are you? Find where you are as you read what's happening. Find which side are you on? Where do you stand? Where? And then you'll know if you need to make a few adjustments, actually. So anyway,
well, you can go on the website and click on the link on there. There's several places to get from Joseph to Exodus, a satellite perspective. You can go there and see. This was done, I think, in 2010. I think I did. So I look a little different than I do today. So
anyway,
we are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.
No one can come to you except through His love. Yeshua is the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to you except through His love. HaTorah, 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 HaTorah.